and telephone ringing and stuff.
All right, can everyone see that?
Looks good.
One of the things I found, okay, now I'm not muted, okay. So one of the things I found was that there are some, I was out of ham radio for a while, and then I got back in and I realized I had a lot of rare countries that I didn't have QSLs for, so it made me jump back into it. So it's pretty elementary, but I think it's worth reviewing. And it's not meant to be exhaustive, but it's an overview. Okay, I'm trying to make the slide change. There we go. All right. So everyone knows what a QSL card is. By definition, it's an acknowledgement of our transmission, and it's a written confirmation or acknowledgement of a contact that we've made. So here's what my current one looks like today on the front and the back side, just as an example. So looking back where QSL cards came from, it's not exactly known when the first card was sent. It was very common practice for listeners of AM radio stations, which were predominant back in those days, the early 1900s, for people to send in written reports on some of the radio stations. And even in the original old days of ham radio, there were some hand confirmations that were used before there were cards. And then a few cards kind of just sort of started to happen. It wasn't organized. It started in many different places kind of independently. And maybe the first card was from around 1916 from Buffalo to New York, as indicated here. And another one in Europe from England in 1922. And of course it's still used for shortwave listening today in CB radio. So here's a few of what some of the old cards look like that I just talked about, with G2UV and 3TR being some of the first QSLs in existence, as an example. And this information actually came from Wikipedia. So Wikipedia has a lot of information on this. So really, QSLing is around 100 years old right now. It's kind of a courtesy. It's been this tradition. Awards, not all awards, but some awards need a physical QSL card to verify the contact. And for me, personally, I find it fun to receive cards from all around the world and for some of the contacts, but it does get expensive. And then there's many ways to keep the cards I wanted to talk about, which is, from wallpaper to cabinets and so on. And of course, cards, the exchange of cards is a one way that DXpeditions will gather money. It's kind of like collecting stamps. Oh yes, I do collect the stamps and save all the foreign stamps too. So a typical card design has, and I know this is still elementary for a lot, but there's a lot of cards go into different cultures, but in general, this is what you need with the call sign and the location, time, date, frequency, and so on and so on. Whether you're portable or mobile, where your address is, add the zones. I didn't add the zones for a long time on mine. It could be a vertical or horizontal. And then you might want to put some show-off kind of things like awards and previous call signs. I put my previous call signs on mine, and email addresses down, what organizations and clubs. I'm going to have to add NCDXC to mine, I think. And any of the photos of your shack or towers or things like that. You could add lots of photos on there. You could be on one side or both sides. On my cards, I like to have even though you can write it in like on a blank card, but a label also fits exactly over the spot on mine too. So I do it that way on purpose. And you can print directly to the cards too. If you make any mistakes on them, it's generally best to just toss them and throw them out and start over again. Some of the things about keeping cards are you know, one of the things that I found especially true is confusing the letters I and the 0 and O, so I with 1 and so on and so on. And sometimes in European format, the dates are a little bit different. And so depending on how your card's arranged, you have to, I usually spell out a month, essentially. And here's what it might look like. That's kind of what mine looks like, and then a label will stick right over it. So here are just a collection of cards that I've had from the very beginning. The first one with the 2 towers on it, and then the yellow one, and then so on and so on, and to my current one. You can buy them pretty cheaply, or you can spend a lot of money on them. Here's a few references for it, and of course you'll get a copy of the presentation. But again, I like to have mine either for direct print or writing in, or being able to stick a label from electronic log printing out there. I've used cheap QSLs before, and you can design your own too if you want to print out your own cards. But I found that to be kind of a pain myself. But you can get you know, 100 for $10, or you can spend more money and get nice glossy photos thing. That's sort of what my next card will be. And then this is not the end of the list at all. You can search on Google or eBay for other card services too. They're plentiful. So are cards still relevant today? They're not always required for all awards, and a lot of us use digital logs. It's kind of a personal decision, and even though it costs money, but let's see what the best way is to get them. So clearly we have the bureau. We can do direct, and QSL managers as a QSL service. I used to use W6IBU, which he no longer does it. It's transferred to K3FN. There's the electronic QSLs. I use that also. And then there's Club Log and with the online QSL request. That's my favorite, actually. And often DXpeditions will publish their own requirements in terms of how they want a QSL, and they may have a direct or use online QSL request. There's obviously no obligation to send a QSL, but if you want one, you usually have to send one, unless it's just an online QSL request and they don't care about receiving your card. They just want your money. This link down here is to M0OXO, has a really good set of instructions on the best way to QSL, because he's a big time QSL manager. So QSL bureaus. This is the ARRL outgoing bureau here. There's nobody in there working at the moment. But some of the advantages and disadvantages are it's the cheapest, and you get a fairly good return rate, and you can send to foreign managers also. This is only for outside the US. But the disadvantages are it can take a long time, and not all DX hams use it, of course. And you can't send IRCs or green stamps either. A funny story about green stamps, when I was younger and someone mentioned to me about sending green stamps, I thought, what is that? There's some kind of stamp that's green that goes on there, and then I found out it was dollars. And then there's the W6 for those of us in W6 country, incoming QSL bureau, and there's the link at the top. And they prefer to supply their own envelopes, but if you do your own, here's the size, the type of envelope you need, and how to address it and stamp it. And usually I send them extra money with a check to the 6th District QSL Bureau in case they need more stamps or they need to buy more envelopes because you have a lot of cards coming in. I actually never used the outgoing QSL Bureau, but I obviously use this, and I have it for my old call and new call. So for outgoing, there's the instructions right from their website, and there's a link to the outgoing QSL Bureau, but mostly it's paid for by weight. So you want an accurate postal scale, and you pay by check or money order and send it to them. And then they have a nice form for filling out the request that goes along with your cards that you're sending out. And what I mostly use besides OQRS is the direct and managers. So here's the infamous or famous M0OXO. He seems to have a few cards to deal with there, and he still looks sane, which is nice. So with QSL managers, it's nice if they have a stateside QSL manager. A lot of people do. And then, of course, you pay postage both ways. You get a very good return rate and time. Overseas, you still get a return rate, but it can get kind of expensive because you've got $1.20 postage going out, and you have at least 2 green stamps you need to include to get postage coming back. I used to use IRCs. I used to buy IRCs from managers, but then it doesn't seem like IRCs are used anymore. That I can, maybe someone has some information on that. And sometimes an extra green stamp or so will get you a better response or a better card. Just depends on how much you want to pay for it. So this is a QSL manager I've used to get my DX contacts many times. He's been doing it for 50 years. That's a long time. And then the direct is a very good return rate. It can get more expensive, usually maybe $2, but I don't think I've done anything for $2 for a while, usually $3. I've never used foreign postage, but if you can get it, fine. But of course, you need a self-addressed stamped envelope. And this is a good way to also send donations, a little extra money to DXpeditions. But surprisingly, sometimes I get dollars returned to me. They say, no, it's too much. And if I send them 3, they'll send me 2 back. So I go, okay, great. And sometimes I'll get an interesting request. So Abu Baker, which probably everyone here almost has worked in the past, he wrote back to me, he said, you know, I'm really interested in football cards. Can you send me some football cards? And so I thought, oh, that would be great. So I went out to the store and I bought a bunch of Dallas Cowboys, 49ers cards, all these famous people, and I'm putting them in the envelope. And then I realized, I don't think he means American football, he means soccer. Because in Europe, it's soccer. And so sure enough, I had to go out and get soccer cards. So now I have a bunch of extra football cards if someone needs them. And then some people, not too long ago, XF4, I don't remember the call sign, he requested $20 for a QSL card. So I said, forget that. That's not going to happen. I have lots of XF4s. And so some of them do ask for a lot of money. And also, one of the things I would suggest is, I had this problem, so maybe no one else has this problem, because all my logs until the pandemic, were paper logs. And so I'd often get some cards together, even if they were multi-band, and I'd send them out, and then I'd find the call that I worked them on another band somewhere else in my log. And then I'd have to send it again, so I kind of wasted some money. So having electronic logs really solves that, but you all know that. So this is in part one of my challenges, was getting QSLs from the 70s still. As I re-engaged myself in the ham radio, I had to look at it was a lot easier to find addresses now than it was then. And of course, I didn't have any money then because I was just a kid. So I like eham.net, which also carries QRZ and QSL. And then the manager list here, you can find resources for that, or with 425 or Ohio Penn DX, and of course the Daily DX is another source. And then there's the old call book. I had saved a number of call books over the years, so I had those. And I have, someone spoke of QSTs from the 20s, I have all the QSTs from the 60s on up. So I would go through the old QSTs and look at the How's DX column and find who the managers were if I couldn't find them anywhere else. You can get all the call books, however, on that link listed under Legacy, so you don't have to have a paper copy anymore. And you can find a lot of old call signs and information from the 20s on up with that particular site I found. So packaging it up. This is how I do it. Other people may have different methods, but this is what I found to be consistent. And it works too when it gets returned to me because I had the wrong address. So eventually, in 6 months, I might get a return. But I use the number 10 security envelope to send. I like to print the addresses, both return and who it's going to if I can. Or I use a label from my logging program. And of course, don't forget the country. I've almost done that a number of times. For the return envelope, I use the number 9, which fits very nicely inside. And it's self-addressed, and I print all those right off the printer. I do a bulk of them, so I have a whole file of self-addressed envelopes, which has the country. I put my completed QSL card in there. I either sign it, and some people have stamps, and then I put the green stamps in. A note about green stamps: they're not legal in every country that you send to. I believe they're illegal in India, but I send them anyhow. So far, I don't know if the other person's gotten arrested or not. It's hard to say. But usually I've heard them back on the air again, so it's probably okay. IRCs seem to be out. So I put the QSL and the dollars in the number 9 envelope, and I fold the flap. I tuck it inside. That way it helps it to keep it from accidentally getting sealed in moist environments. So I seal it all up. I don't use tape on the outside because that could signifies to some that there's something important in here that they need to see. Well, and it also can gum up the automatic sorting machines in the mail. And don't write your call signs on it because that's an immediate notification to some people. There's dollars inside. So those old QSLs. Yes, you can still get old ones. And there's a copy of what How's DX look like. I would go look for that a lot. Usually they have to be alive still, but not always, because some people, I've traced down 3 different, gone from one person, the logs went to another person, then another person, three layers after the person passed away, and I've been able to find it. Of course, you go through the old QSTs and so on, but sometimes I don't get a QSL card back. I just get a note confirming the conversation because they don't have any cards left, of course. There's another thing you can do is you can put a blank there's specifically blank QSLs. I'll show you an example later that you can put in and they can fill out their call, address, everything, and then sign it and send that back to you. One thing I also found that helps get a response is writing out a message about how important it is to get in their own language. So before Google, I used to use language books for some of the common languages so I could translate it and write out a proper note to them. And then, of course, they think I'm speaking their language, but then they send me a note back that I have to translate. It's kind of interesting. So some of the QSLs that I received from the 70s, not that long ago, was I was looking, I didn't realize this at the time, but it turns out there's a lot of obsolete countries. Some of them I don't have QSLs for, so I can't claim them, of course. But I did get some back from the Yemen, Surrounded Bank, Swan Island is an example of some cards, and there's a few others too. But here's the example of, I don't need this QSL card, but I sent the blank one, and he fills it in, 9L1RP, and sends it back to me. So that was very helpful. I also I mentioned the QSL service, W6IBU. He was the classic one. He's now retired. There's a picture of him there. It looks pretty tiring, his job there. And then you could, it's kind of like a QSL bureau service, but K3FN has taken over. I have never used it, so I don't know if anyone has experience using it. And then the other one I found, when I discovered this one, I found a lot of people sent me QSL cards this way I didn't even know about. So you can register onto electronic QSLs, and there's quite a bit of rare DX that prefers this method. You can still print out a QSL card. Sometimes they're very plain, depends on how much effort they put into developing a QSL card that they would send you. So here's an example of some of the QSL cards found on there. It could be a little bit more plain, like the ZS3D, a little bit more fancy like A92GE that I printed out recently from them, and so on. So you basically go to their site and you log in, you set up your password, and it's free. But of course they ask for donations, so we should do that. And on this page here, each step here is a hot link that you can go right to it to register on the eQSL. So you usually upload your logs in the ADIF format, just as you would Logbook of the World. And if you're on there, you'll find, once you log in, you'll find out that you probably have a lot of QSL cards that get sent to you, and then you can do the same. You can't use any of these, of course, for awards from ARRL, but you can for perhaps some other awards. I don't know the extensive list, except for some of the ones they have themselves. And then at the bottom link there has a nice presentation of all their directions, explanations of how to use the QSL. And then there's Logbook of the World and Club Log. Okay, you may find this strange, and I may be one of the last holdouts in the whole club here, that it was because of COVID, I was able to finally transfer all my paper logs to electronic. So Now I have everything in electronic. I don't know why I didn't do that before, but at least if I'll have my logs if the fire burns everything else down. There's lots of logging programs to do this. I'm pretty sure most everyone here uses DXLab or something of that nature. And there's a lot of free ones too. So with Club Log, a lot of DXpeditions use this, at least to confirm your contact. They may or may not use it for QSLs, but they typically have a link to the online QSL request, OQRS, and usually the costs are at least $3. I don't think I've found anything cheaper than that for some of the QSLs that I requested. See, my most recent one that I received was FT5PA, and that was $3. So that wasn't too bad. And this is what the page kind of looks like. You put in the log to search, and they search for your call sign, and then it may or may not have the option to get the QSL, but I use that a lot. And then there's Logbook of the World, which is so simple to use. No. And again, you upload your QSL to the site, and you have a digital signature for that. And then once you upload your log, it attempts to match your QSOs with others, and you may find QSOs that you didn't know about because maybe it got lost in your paper log somewhere, like I have. And then each match is a verified QSL, and there's no QSL paper QSL option. You still have to go around that to do that. But you can combine all those with your paper logs to get awards, and then it keeps track of your award statistics. And strangely enough, I don't know why. I know I was afraid to send in my QSL cards, some of my very hard to get ones, and I've never applied for a single award. So I've worked them all, but I haven't applied for anything. So maybe I'll do that someday. So again, if you haven't gone electronic, go for it. Here's some links here for getting onto Lord of the Rings, not Lord of the Rings, Logbook of the World. And it looks like to me it's about as complicated as FT8. So that should be no problem for most people. And so once you get all the cards, what do you do with them all? So there's a lot of things you can do. Used to hang them on the wall. That's me when I was a novice. It says upgraded the W6IBU because I just added a VFO, although I didn't use it. And there's a DX60 behind me there. But that's how I used to hang them all until I got too many QSL cards. You notice most of them are states, very few are overseas. So those are the old wall hangers. You can use notebooks and file cabinets, and eventually I kind of wanted to look like that, but I just didn't have enough room for that. So here's what I use right now. This is an antique file cabinet. You see the 3 missing drawers? Those are my QSLs that I took out for the fire, and the rest are in there with blank cards and states cards and things that I didn't really care about, envelopes and so on, but I use that. There's the old hangers that you can use. Or you can use this notebook from BCW. I've got a link for this in here later. You can buy it off of Amazon or direct from BCW. But that's a nice, I used to do that for a while, and I kept them in like a safe deposit box, or a safe, a fireproof safe, and then I decided to put them in the drawers because I couldn't see them all the time. But that's one way you can take it anywhere, you can frame them. There's some more file cabinets. I don't have that many cards yet. And then there's organizers that you can buy to sort them by countries or letters or numbers and so on. So that becomes very handy. And one of the things you can also do is to scan them in and put them in one of those digital photo screens, and you can have it, just go through your display and so on, which is one of the plans I have to do on my list. So here's a link to the albums, and you can show them by any way you want, and the file cabinets, and there's a link for the dividers that you can put in your file cabinets. I ended up making sort of my own, and then you have the wall hangers, display boards, and electronic frames. So what happens, unfortunately, this is not a good subject, but what happens to our QSLs when we're gone? We can't take them with us. We spend a lot of time and money getting them. So one of the things I've done with my kids is I've left instructions as to their disposition along with the equipment, because I don't want them to say, oh, this isn't valuable, throw it in the trash. They still may do that, or they may end up on eBay.
Oh, it's frozen.
Yeah?
Oh, there you are. You froze for a while, Paul.
Oh, okay. Where did I stop?
Just go back about 15 seconds.
Okay, well, I was talking about not being able to take your slides with us and leaving instructions for our kids as to the disposition of not just our equipment, but QSL cards. You'll find a lot of them end up on eBay, unfortunately. And so I think it's important, if you don't care, that's fine, but I would leave instructions as to the disposition. Otherwise, they're gonna end up on K6MKF's porch for him to archive someday. So in summary, and I'm winding up here, I love collecting QSL cards. I know that one time, my wife always got excited whenever I'd receive QSL cards. She thought, oh, that's so cool. And then she saw me, what I put in the QSL cards to get the QSL cards. She go, what, you putting dollars in there? Okay, well, it takes some dollars to get them. All of us should have our own personalized versions, of course, and a nice way to display and store them. There's a number of methodologies to use to obtain the cards, so pick the best one. I still like OQRS because it's the simplest. And of course, the QSL cards are valuable if you want to get awards, especially since not everyone is on Logbook of the World yet either. And then plan what happens to your cards when you're gone. Any questions?
Yes, Paul.
Yeah.
Here's my QSL card from Clipperton.
I have your QSL card from Clipperton.
Oh, that's Lyle showing you the QSL card from Clipperton.
I don't see anything because I'm
He
still
froze.
sharing probably.
He's holding up a coconut.
The coconut, Paul.
I can't see it, sorry. I have a number of cards from Clipperton, though, I do. So it wouldn't surprise me.
That's pretty cool.
Coconut is signed by some of the club members here.
Ah,
One of the tips that I got early on for QSLing was to use $2 bills because they're exceedingly rare overseas.
oh,
And so I figure in for a penny, in for a pound. So I'll put either a $2 bill or two $2 bills in. And I've gotten extreme response from Mongolia. I even got the equivalent Mongolian currency sent back to me. I thought that was pretty cool.
oh. Yeah, you never know what you might get back. Sometimes you get some green stamps, sometimes you get extra postage, or you get some of their currency back, or some notes. I get lots of family pictures.
That's interesting.
One of the things that I noticed through the QSL cards of Phil W6IBU and handing them was that at one time the NCDXC had blank cards. They had blank cards that they would send out, and people would fill them out and send them back. Yeah, they kind of look like that.
Yeah, Paul, one thing I'd like to add is that I was inactive for a couple of years, and during that time, one of the expeditions to one of the rare French locations in the Indian Ocean occurred. So I got on and worked them, but then I got back to it, and I never sent them a card. So I started looking in the different sources that you looked at, and sure enough, they all said, well, this person's gone, or the logs are gone, or we can't find them, or anything like that. And it finally ended up like there were 3 or 4 different people that just couldn't figure out what was going on, but yet there were cards coming through. So don't sell Google short for getting QSL cards, because I finally tracked mine down to a VE2 who I thought might have the logs. And so since I can speak French, I included all the cards, and I included a short letter as to why this was important in French. And a week later, bingo, card comes back.
That's fantastic. In fact, I should add that if you can know who all the members are, I found on I think it was the Sarana Bank one, which is an expired, deleted country, that it listed who all the hams were. They weren't all alive. and they didn't all handle it, but I just kept going down the list of each one on the DXpedition. I eventually found someone.
I was going to ask how you got that card because I got the same one. I sent for mine then, but when I saw the card that you had, I thought, wait a minute, those guys aren't around. How do you get that?
No, none of them are around anymore now. That's true. That was probably about 10 years ago I got that card. But that's still long ways from the 70s.
Well, seeing Lyle's QSL card, one of the things that I used to do when I would go down to the South Pacific, people that I knew, I would find something, and usually it was from an atoll I was at, and so I was always sending out a bunch of these clamshells that were the QSL card. And when my dad passed on, I've got my QSL card that I gave my dad one of these filled out clamshells. And it's kind of interesting to see if what different methods are used to send out cards for special things.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. In fact,
Paul?
I believe I have your card from when I was a novice, Ross.
I remember that.
Paul,
Yeah.
what's the longest time you've ever had to wait to get back a card, one that you really wanted?
A couple of years, even though I sent him direct. Yeah.
What's the shortest time?
Well, then that would be the U.S., like less than a week.
Yeah,
I've had-
sure.
You know, it's interesting. OH2BH, he almost sends all of his QSOs directly right out to the Bureau, but I've had him handed directly to me at IDXCC too, which was nice.
If you had to summarize and say the quickest way that you found to get some of the rare ones, is there a quickest way that you could say this is the best?
I would go with the OQRS, the online QSL request.
Yeah,
At least for all the recent ones, most seem to use that.
yeah.
And it's less work on my end, of course, except for the dollars.
Yep.
What was your toughest card?
My toughest card.
Yeah, the one
It was that 4W1 from Republic of Yemen. Although some, I know this, actually Alpha 92 GE, I had sent him multiple requests to get a card from him. Of course, I had his EQSL cards, but I wanted the real paper one. I had sent it 3 times to him. I emailed to him. He never answered me, but finally I got some cards. But it took a couple of years of trying.
Well, I've got 2. One was VU4RBI. That was the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, the expedition that was there. And just after they're finished up, there was the tsunami, right? Well, it took me, I would say 10 years. I finally tracked down one of the ladies that was on the expedition. She was working for the telecommunications ministry in India and got that one.
One of my most enjoyable ones was when I was younger, I just had a wire antenna to work a VK0IR. I didn't have that one. That was pretty rare. And I don't remember the ham who answered me. But when I wrote the card, I wrote in there how I'd been up in the rain on the antenna putting the 40-meter dipole up so that I could work him the next morning, and he wrote me a really nice message back. So including personal messages, it helps, I think. Yeah,
it does. Now JT1CO is driving me crazy.
Oh, you don't have that one?
I've got Mongolia, but I've got an 80-meter QSL over to get confirmation. So I sent it out, and it got turned back undeliverable at this address, but it matched the QRZ. So I scanned the envelope and I sent the image to his QSL or to his email address and said, what should I be doing here? And within a week, his QRZ.com page got updated with another address. So I sent it out again. But I do want Mongolia on 80 meters in the worst possible way.
My longest one, Paul, was 13 years.
Oh.
To get a card. Yeah.
Paul, I've got a question for you. You mentioned that you were typing all of your old paper logs in. Did you type them right into your logging program, or did you have a fast typing program? Because I know there's a fellow in Germany that has a piece of software you can just type in the call sign and part of the report information, and it interprets everything else when it gets copied into your online log.
I guess I did it the hard way. I typed it in one line at a time, like offline, I guess.
Paul, to reply to what Mike was saying, I did get back one once, and I can't recall where it was, but they said it was the wrong address, the wrong QTH. I looked it up. I had sent it to the right one. I sent it back again to the same address, and the second time around, I got a QSL card.
That's happened to me. Addresses in Japan. You're getting things in the right order. They'll look at it and go, "Oh, wrong one."
Yeah.
The other thing that I like about the Bureau, when you get a big slug of Bureau cards, you'll get a lot of JA cards. And
Oh, yeah.
a lot of them are just, they're just heading for the trash. They're only in my hand for a moment. But some of them are just works of art. The beautiful prints. And,
Oh, yeah. I have received some pretty risque cards, so to speak. And so that was one thing I was going to mention on your own card designs, to realize that different countries have different religions. You want to really, leave stuff like political and religious things, just like the radio, leave it off the cards, and be cognizant of, what the country that you're sending it to, if they're sensitive about anything.
there were a couple of cards from that Phil's had received that were in the archives that did not get scanned.
Everybody knew it.
I can imagine.
Okay, moving on.
All right.
Thank you, Paul.
No, thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Great review.
There's a set of references here in the deck, and then of course the end.
The end.
Thanks, Paul. That's something I need to get on to.